After floods, fires and a pandemic, all in the same parliamentary term, Australia has finally had its climate change election.
Together, we can end the climate wars.
With golden soil and wealth fertile, our home is guarded by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair.
Hello and welcome to episode 115 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham. This week, Tesla's Dalhousie Battery Research Group unveils a paper on new high-energy density battery that could last 100 years at 25 degrees Celsius. I wouldn't last 100 days at that temperature.
The Biden administration commits $5 billion to electrify school buses. For those fearful of change, Biden confirmed that the wheels on the bus will still go round and round.
Elon Musk announced that Tesla's building a hardcore litigation department. So let me take this opportunity to say, Elon Musk is a childish, thin-skinned, largely unfunny, incapable of holding together a marriage, hair-plugged, obese in spite of fat-shaming others, gullible, impotent, impulsive, sexist, emotionally vacant, terrible at naming children, and a terrible father from all accounts. He propagates cancel culture while publicly speaking against it. Anti-union, narcissistic, he smells funny, and he's terrible at being successful.
Australia elects a climate-friendly prime minister who has pledged to end the climate wars. This is either a good thing or the way the Mad Max future begins.
All that and more on this edition of The Clean Energy Show.
You may hear some noise from my microphone. I have some construction going on at my house, so if you hear banging and clanging, that's what it is. This bomb shelter has wonderful sound dampening, but it's not soundproof. So I'm getting my ceiling worked on in the kitchen. We've had a leaking roof for, all the time we've owned this house, about 15 years. Anyway, we think that relates to clean energy because we think that the problem this time is probably the solar panels, the way the solar panels were affixed to the roof.
Really?
Because we're getting fresh leaks.
Oh.
So we're tearing down the drywall in the kitchen, and we're hoping that will sort of point to where the trouble spot is. And then once we know where the trouble spot is, then we can have someone go up on the roof and remove a solar panel or two and figure out where the problem is. But yeah, we think it's some of the footings of the way the panels are attached to the roof.
Well, that's frightening as hell.
And these things are always worse when you have a low slope roof. So
Yes.
That's what the last guy explained to me. Anytime you've got a low slope on your roof, these kinds of problems just occur more easily. You just need less water pooling to get, the water just travels more slowly down the roof. So it can lead to problems.
Well, Brian, I have no personal stories from this week. I'm sorry.
Well, I've got one more.
Okay, go ahead, shoot.
Sask Power also showed up today to drill the hole for my new power line. So they're putting the power line underground, and they showed up today with a horizontal drill. They didn't tell us they were coming. And on the same day that the guys are coming in to remove the drywall. So anyway, I think that's all done now. They had this big horizontal drilling machine, and they were drilling away for a couple hours.
So if you didn't have your bomb shelter, which is a Cold War bomb shelter in your down below, we probably wouldn't be able to record today.
No, it would probably be even worse. But they seem to have stopped for the moment. But there was some pretty loud clanging that might show up.
They probably got their
on the
ear to the floor and are listening to the show. I mean, who wouldn't?
Yeah.
Well, let's get on with it, Brian. I was reading on Facebook that a local person here posted that they had to have their EV, their brand new EV that they bought with the faith that the charging network on the highways worked. And it didn't, and they had to get towed from Whitewood to Yorkton where they lived. Now, Whitewood is one of those stops that you take on the way to the lake. It's just Just a small town on the highway.
Yeah, that's where the Tesla charger is, and the Co-op gas station has a third-party charger, too.
Isn't there a Petro-Canada one there? Because they mentioned that didn't work, or at least one nearby didn't work.
There is a Petro-Canada station. I'm not sure if it has a charger, but yeah.
Well, they said both the chargers, both the third-party chargers, this was a non-Tesla, I think it was a Kia Niro, they just bought it, all happy with it, and then you're getting towed because none of the gas stations work. It's inconceivable because around here, I mean, we're just starting to see EVs that aren't Teslas, you know, but the Teslas have been around for a couple of years and have been using the charging network on a regular basis. But the chargers that aren't working, they're hardly used. Up until recently, they've probably been hardly used at all.
Which is, one of the reasons these problems go unchecked is because, well, no one's been using them. Why bother?
Well, I'm sure one or two people a day would use them at the very least. And, you know, probably a handful regularly. But as it goes, it's not a nonstop operation here. And why the hell aren't they working? Why are these gas station companies making – this is a big problem in North America, and it pisses me off. So Elon Musk says that they will have self-driving cars without the need for human drivers this time next year. That's BS. That's delusional thinking. I don't care because, you know, he said that last year, and how much has full self-driving progressed? It's progressed. I mean, in pure AI amazement, sure, it's amazing, but we are not leaping towards, taking away the steering wheel anytime soon.
I think you're right, but I think they've made lots of kind of behind the scenes, under the hood kind of advancements, which I think they see as major victories. Like they got rid of LiDAR, for instance, or the radar in the Tesla cars, and they went to pure vision. And sure, it didn't automatically make all the cars be able to drive themselves, but that was a huge kind of step change in the underlying technology that they were very proud of. And then the other thing was vector space. So they've figured out the full self-driving computer to work in vector space. Now, again, it isn't just a flip the switch and, we figured out vector space and suddenly the cars could drive themselves. I think, it probably feels amazing to them, and they probably feel like they've made amazing progress. It's just not the kind of progress that, leads to the cars actually driving themselves.
I don't know about him. I have low confidence in Mr. Musk for all kinds of reasons, not just his childish behavior, but his tantrums. But I'm starting to wonder if he's actually going to focus on Tesla, if he's just going to go downhill and becoming a babbling idiot at some point.
Well, do you remember, James, we talked about this quite a while ago. What is my least favorite thing, James?
The news.
Well, no.
Penal electrification.
Okay, my second least favorite thing. No, I don't like arguing with people on the internet.
Yes.
Like it's the absolute worst. But there are people who love it. They absolutely love it.
I know. I was telling this the other day to my kids. That I know people are keyboard warriors. And they're the sun up to sundown. That's all they do. And they're just happy to do it. They think they're making a difference.
But the problem is when you have somebody who is super, super famous and they are also a troll who likes to argue with people on the internet, they have a way of then kind of driving the public conversation, which is super irritating and is also going to lead to you likely having a heart attack any day now. I sent you that article a few days ago about they've done a study and they've proven that taking a week off from social media will improve your mental health. So I feel that, James, this is an intervention.
You think I should stay off social media?
I think you should take a week off because you don't like arguing with people on the internet.
Well, I don't.
Some people
I generally don't argue with them, though. But the internet pisses me off like everyone else.
But you see what I'm saying? Like people who are super famous and also like, trolls, they just have this ability to drive the public conversation, and it's super annoying.
It is. So in Ottawa, in Canada, the capital of Canada, they had a major storm there that killed 10 people on the weekend. And it wasn't a tornado. It was I think a plow wind. This really fierce, 135 or more kilometer an hour wind that just plows down for a few seconds out of a tornado-like storm in one direction. Mm-hmm. There's all kinds of power lines down, but one of my friends there, I've got multiple friends in Ottawa for some reason, but one of my friends there is still without power. And
is it the Prime Minister?
It is. Well, I can't say. One of the fallbacks from this is that the gas stations have run out of gas. People say, what happens if the power goes out? You're stranded in your electric car. That's not going to work. Well, you dipshit. The power goes out. You can't pump gas. You know?
No. Somebody literally said that to me. I was parking my car and got into that quick conversation about EVs. And the guy said, well, but how do you charge your car when the power's out? That's not going to work.
Well, the power doesn't go out very often. And then you see that your car sitting in the driveway at 0%? No, can't do that.
Yeah.
You're more likely to power your house.
But gas pumps also need electricity to run.
Which, if I was in my friend's situation, I would be powering my fridge instead of having it go bad. I would have been, well, I don't have one, but I would have run to the hardware store to buy an inverter to hook up to the 12-volt battery. You keep the car running. You run an extension cord to your fridge and maybe a couple of lights, and that's it. And you do the minimal you can. You don't open your fridge very often if you can help it. You might even turn the settings down on the fridge. But I wouldn't be throwing out food if I had an electric car, any electric car.
Now, I just watched this fascinating video on YouTube recently. The channel is called Cody Harvey. He's a construction guy in Alberta here in Canada. And he just released this amazing video where he built this small building, 2,200 square feet. It's a commercial building with insulated concrete forms and super insulation, like R35 in the walls and more in the ceiling. And he finished this over Christmas. And before he handed the building over to the owners, he was able to do a test where he shut off all the heat for 2 days when it was minus 35 Celsius outside, because he wanted to see how much heat it would retain. And it was amazing. Like after 2 days, it wasn't always minus 35. It sort of warmed up to minus 25 or so. And with the wind chill, it was minus 40. But it was still 13 degrees Celsius after 2 days in this building, just because it's properly insulated.
Here's the thing, though, about the power outages not being able to pump gas, where you can say, well, I'll go to one of the gas stations that has power. You know what's happening there? There's 5-block lineups, and they're running out of gas because half the gas stations aren't working. So the ones that do have gas, that's the case. Whereas I could take an electric car to another friend's house across town who has power, charge up there, drop a Finsky in his mailbox, and continue on. Or find a charger somewhere that works on PlugShare and just on my app, and then just go there and then charge up, and then come back and power my fridge for more days if necessary. So it's just, the ignorance out there is just incredible. And, I was scanning something today, and I came across, an actual article that says electric cars are a sham. They use up massive resources and aren't telling anyone about it. Well, those resources that they use are almost 100% recyclable. They're vastly, and we're just beginning. We haven't even started recycling batteries yet. And that technology is only going to improve. So it's a frustrating world out there with, these are intelligent people who come up with these things, Brian. They're not, the village idiot. They're very smart people who are smart in other ways, have really stupid preconceptions and misconceptions about that. So, and here's another update to some of the stories we're following over the past shows. Vancouver is requiring gas stations and parking lots with EV chargers to pay $10,000 per year if they want to renew their business license if they don't install EV chargers. And they have until January of 2025, 2.5 years from now. So that's $10,000 per year extra if you don't have EV. So basically, that's an interesting, what do you think of that? That's an interesting incentive. Do you think it'll work?
Yeah, I was surprised by that. Yeah, it seems like a good idea.
I think it'll have to work because it does cost $135,000 for gas stations to install a DC fast charger. But then you're making a bit of money off of that, right? I mean, you're going to make money off of having that. It's not just, you're not giving it away for free. I suppose you could, but after 13 years, I guess you would have to break even. And parking lots have to do it as well. Commercial parking lots of a certain size have to install at least 4 level 2 EV chargers. So that's very cool. I don't know what they're doing in Norway in those regards, but that seems like a good way to, it's going to be harsh. It's pretty harsh government policy if you're against that sort of thing, but I mean, it may work. And Brian, we've talked about Gogoro electric scooters with those swappable batteries. So I've got a bit of an update that they posted. This is the 6 years that they've been around. In the last 6 years, since they became sort of big, and their charges have went from 180, their stations, charging stations, those almost vending machine-like things at 7-Elevens in different places, went from 180 to 2,200. And the distance between those stations dropped from 1.3 kilometers to just 0.5 kilometers, which is, that's a pretty small space between stations.
That's a few blocks. Yeah, that's not much.
You look at like 150 kilometers for EV chargers on the highway. Well, this is nothing for a bike. Hell, if you ran out, I mean, that's pretty sweet. That's pretty reliable. So their battery swaps per day, get this, they were just 7,000 6 years ago, and now they're 328,000.
Per day.
320. So this is really happening. And I've got more on this later, how much this is changing the oil consumption. But CO2 saved was 800,000 kilograms, and now it's 439 million kilograms. Wow. That's a big deal. We don't think about that sort of form of transportation in North America, but if you have to look at the world picture, yeah, that's a big deal. Speaking of automation, Waymo employees will be able to use their autonomous rides in downtown Phoenix in the coming weeks. So they're expanding from one suburb to downtown, which is interesting. They will have what they call a specialist present. That's a dude driving the vehicle or standing by to take over. But they're also going to the Sky Harbor Airport, which is interesting. That's a complicated, busy place. And if they screw up there, Brian, they're going to cause congestion if they're hesitant and not aggressive in their driving these vehicles, and then people are going to get mad. We'll have to see how that goes. So, well, Brian, the big story this week, the Australian election. And thank God for this.
After floods, fires, and a pandemic, all in the same parliamentary term, Australia has finally had its climate change election.
Together, we can end the climate wars.
Because we've had some connection to Juice Media in Australia and have heard from some people there. My daughter, I don't know how to tell you this, but she spends her many hours a day talking to two friends in Australia on this gaming thing that she's trying to send a parcel there. And I keep telling her, it's not cheap to send something to Australia, including people. It might be cheaper to send a person, in fact. And, I'm worried that she's going to send something and they're going to get, a customs charge. Some 14-year-old kid is going to get like
possibly
a $300 customs charge thanks to my daughter just being overly eager. Anyway. And all it is a book. I think she should just send it by Amazon. In fact, I have to write that down and talk to her. So, it's been 10 years, Brian, of this horrible, many people would say climate-denying government in Australia. They've been very pro-coal and very pro-fossil fuels and didn't give a crap what the rest of the world thought. And now they're gone. So that's a wonderful, beautiful thing.
Yeah, no, that's an amazing development. So yeah, congratulations to all of our friends and listeners in Australia. This is a nice change. Did you know that Australia uses a preferential voting on their ballot?
I did not know that.
Yeah, so it hasn't been around that long. I can't remember, like a decade or two. But you first of all, you have to vote. It's the law in Australia.
Okay.
You have to vote. And presumably you get fined or thrown in jail or something if you don't vote. But yeah, you do. It's a ranked ballot. So you have your first choice candidate and then you second, third, and I think maybe they have to rank everybody. And this was brought in by the Conservatives because at the time there were a couple of Conservative parties and they were worried that it was going to split the vote unless they did something like this. So I think it worked well for the Conservatives when they brought it in. And now I guess maybe it's worked well for the other side.
Ah, okay. Well, that's interesting. So here they're going to be on track to meet net zero by 2050, which is what we need the whole stinking world to do. And some of the measures include upgrade the electricity grid to fix energy transmission and drive down prices further, allocate up to $3 billion to invest in green metals, clean energy component manufacturing, agricultural methane reduction and waste reduction, and they're going to roll out 85 solar banks, previously called solar gardens. And I asked my son, do you know what a solar garden is, Brian?
No.
I didn't either, and I'm kind of embarrassed by that. So this brings us to another edition of What James Learned.
We are willing to learn.
What James learned.
Solar gardens started in the United States, actually, where people were locked out of solar, and they didn't have the ability to subscribe. It was Ellensburg, Washington. The local energy utility partnered with community groups to build a 36-kilowatt solar garden, a solar array that is owned by multiple subscribers and connected to the utility grid. Now, we would call that a solar co-op in Canada, right?
Yeah, and I do think that those do exist around here for people who live in apartments and such.
Yeah. So what you do is you put in money and you get back money eventually when you start making a profit off it, and you're also funding. But this is a little different because there are like you could put it on a business and it goes to the community, the whole community. They have to pay a part of the funds for it and get money back. Small businesses can benefit from a big business doing it and things like that. There's different models, but they're all community owned, and the government is going to help set those up, and they're going to put money into it. They're going to install 400 community batteries along with these. So it's not just, the solar gardens, as they used to call them, or solar banks. They're actually going to put batteries in communities too, 400 of them. And 10,000 new energy apprentices jobs and a new energy skills program, which we should be doing here. I haven't heard a lot of that here in North America. We need to do a lot more of that. Brian, as we know and have talked about on the show, and you point out a lot, is that the states have done all the heavy lifting on renewables in Australia, made heavier by obstruction of the previous federal government. Yeah, they were throwing monkey wrenches into things.
And yet, rooftop solar is huge in Australia because people were at least allowed to do it.
Well, congratulations, Australia. Welcome to the world.
In the United States, the Biden administration has pledged $5 billion to electrify school buses in that country. So school buses are something we talk about a lot on the show. It's absolutely ripe for electrification. And the fact that we make our children breathe in those horrible diesel fumes is terrible. So the American Lung Association had been calling for $20 billion. I don't know how much it's actually going to cost, but $5 billion now has been pledged from the Biden administration, and perhaps states and local districts can make up the rest of what's going to be needed. So yeah, it's not going to be cheap, but this is a nice step forward.
The school buses are on the precipice of taking off. Because the economics have become better, and it's, the people who operate school buses are for profit. And if the economics change on a mass scale like that, and you start getting grants to subsidize it, it's going to take off in a crazy way. Brian, there's a 100-year battery possible with Tesla's Dalhousie University in Halifax, Canada. They have published a paper to research paper, and they've shown that new high energy density batteries could last 100 years if kept at 25 degrees Celsius or 77 Fahrenheit. And they accomplished this just with basically tweaking the chemistry, it's like tweaking the recipe. Instead of a dash of oregano, it's a pinch, something like that.
Yeah. Well, it's like the Dubai light bulb we were talking about the other week, where they just put in more LED filaments in the bulb and just drove them at half the power, and it turned out to be just way more efficient.
Yeah, and they're also lowering the voltage. They're operating them at a lower voltage. And that, I think it's 3.8 volts instead of 4.2. They reduced the graphite for operation so that it only goes to 3.8 instead of 4.2. And they found that the energy density that has exceeds LFP cells, and the life cycle greatly exceeds that of LFP cells at 40 degrees, 55 degrees, and 70 degrees. But at 25 degrees, if you can somehow keep it there, Geez, Brian, I'm trying to think of a use for a 100-year battery, unless you're sending a spaceship to the outer reaches of the solar system onto the next star. And that can't be kept at 25 degrees. Yeah, I guess it could be, because they put like depleting uranium bits in their things to keep things warm on the Mars rover and things that just sort of constantly decay.
But I mean, always better to have it last longer, right?
Always better to have it last longer, and presumably you could, go crazy on the cycles and maybe abuse the battery a little bit. I know that would outlast any car. The battery would outlast any. There's no car that we know of that would last that long in any way, shape, or form. So I don't know. That's interesting. And, when we move from, say, an 8-year battery or a 10-year battery to a 20-year battery, which they're talking about, that makes a big difference on the price when you're pricing out kilowatts on grid storage. So, and these are pouch cells, by the way, so we'll have to see how that pans out and if it's commercially viable before 2030 when our show ends.
Yeah, no, imagine that, like buying a giant battery for your grid, and it's a way better economic proposition if it lasts 100 years instead of 20. CNBC is reporting that it is now cheaper to switch from coal to renewables instead of from coal to gas. So the fossil fuel industry often talks about natural gas as a bridge fuel, but I'm here to say we can burn that bridge now. So there's
like
this.
That.
Thank you.
Good one.
I worked on that all week. So there's a climate analytics firm called Transition Zero. This is a nonprofit, and they're the ones crunching the numbers on this. And of course, this is going to be slightly different depending on which country, which jurisdiction that you're in. But I went to their website. They have a fantastic animation because this wasn't always true, right? Like, it was typically cheaper to switch to natural gas from coal instead of going all the way and switching to renewables. So yeah, they've got this fantastic animation on their website of a graph of the cost of the two. And in the last 6 months or the last year, the lines have crossed, and it is now absolutely cheaper to skip that step. And don't bother going from coal to natural gas, just go straight to renewables. It's just cheaper, something we talk about a lot on the show. And this is something that hopefully, banks will take notice of this, because one of the problems that we have in this arena is, banks are still funding these fossil fuel projects. But if you can look at the numbers and show that it literally does not make sense to spend any money on natural gas, go straight to renewables, that's the better option. And banks should stop funding anything that's not that.
For all these people who make gobs of money, they're way behind. There's a lag before they catch on to these things. And it's true that coal has been killed by natural gas.
Yeah.
But that's no longer true anymore, because you can go right to renewables now.
Yeah, and these things, in the business world, in presumably the energy world, these things just move slowly. We need more of those people to listen to the Clean Energy Show and become early adopters. Not a lot of early adopters in the conservative business world.
Brian, experts are forecasting wind power in the future. So they did a survey. They do a survey every few years, 5 years. They survey all the experts who are working in the industry and are developing things and are studying it, and they want to know what is going to happen. And it's interesting. They think that it's going to be up to 35% cheaper in 2035 than it is today. And it's interesting, though, because that's not as steep as the solar decline, is it? Solar could be, Biden wants it to be half as much in 2030. And I think that's doable. Most people, he's not crazy. That is doable with a massive deployment of solar. So they think it's going to be 35% cheaper for offshore and a little bit less for onshore. And the way they're going to do it is, I think the height of the turbines is going to increase. They're always increasing the size of these things. So one turbine built equals more energy produced. They're getting better at where they can put them. They said they'll be able to put them in less favorable siting conditions because they're bigger and just are working better. So that will open up more options.
Yeah, for some reason with wind turbines, bigger seems to be always better. So yeah, I wonder how big they could actually get.
Maybe they'll touch space one day. So taller turbines and their larger rotor diameters allow for the capture of more energy. The experts predicted that the hub height will be 130 meters, and that is about 15 meters more than they predicted 5 years ago. So, and 15 meters, 45 feet higher. So yeah, they're creeping higher. This is on average.
We were talking about like sort of farm-based wind turbines not too long ago, like windmills on farms was such a common thing. But yeah, for some reason there's a scale thing where home wind turbines just don't make as much sense as solar just because of the scale. Yeah. Like a small wind turbine just doesn't get you where you need it to go.
And I know there's lots of different designs, different horizontal and, things like that, but they haven't taken off, and they still require, it is a moving part, so you have to think that it requires maintenance more often. And also they make noise and have to do with regulations and things like solar panels are completely silent. I haven't heard anything out of my solar panels yet. So these and many other design choices would support a levelized cost of electricity reduction of 27% onshore and 35% for offshore. Now, that's not the cost of the turbine. That's the cost that you're getting the cost of electricity that these things will produce in their lifetime. So looking good for wind, but maybe not as good as solar.
We've got a report here from NERC. Do you know what NERC is, James?
I do not know what NERC is, but I like saying NERC.
NERC is the North American Electric Reliability Corp, which is a nonprofit that is not a regulator exactly, but an overseer of the electricity grids here in North America. So this is a story from Power Magazine, and every year they do an assessment. And so they've done an assessment for summer 2022 in terms of grid reliability. And of course, we know that we've had lots of extreme weather events recently. So yeah, they're basically there's a summer risk assessment here in this article from Power Magazine that I thought was interesting. A lot of it is not entirely predictable because this is going to depend on things like weather. So for instance, in the eastern United States, they're expecting some capacity shortfall from retiring some generators, as well as increased demand. In Texas, they're expecting drought-related heat events could raise the risk of extreme demand in Texas.
Yeah.
And our province here in Saskatchewan is also mentioned in this report.
Really?
And yes, because the forecasts, and they work with different utilities, and our utility is forecasting much higher peak demand than previously. Their projections for peak demand are up 7.5% from what they were projecting just last year. So they actually state in this article, and I think this is something that has come from Sask Power, our local utility, if things go poorly this summer, we might have rolling blackouts. That's
in where we live.
Where we live, yes.
Oh, cry me.
No,
this is one of those things where we report on things on the other side of the world. We don't think it's going to happen to us.
No, we don't.
A little place in Canada.
But yeah, so and I expect that would come if we have another heat wave. So I imagine they put their peak projections higher because of the massive heat wave that we had last summer, which no doubt, people were cranking the air conditioning. So
I might be powering my air conditioner with my car, not my fridge. Holy crap.
Yeah. So there is literally a chance of rolling blackouts this summer if things go badly. I mean, hopefully they're cautious enough that it'll all work out.
Mr. Stockton, if I see a 45-degree forecast down on the end of the week-long forecast, I'm going to Canadian Tire and buying an inverter for my car, the best one you can buy, and getting ready to power my house because, holy crap.
Or you could just sleep in your car.
I could. I could do that.
Yep. No, I think people were doing that on the West Coast in Canada.
Really?
And the U.S. People were sleeping in their Teslas when it got so hot because a lot of places don't have air conditioning there, but it was an extreme heat event last year.
Interesting. We talked about previously on the show, people, how long can you stay in like a traffic? Because people were joking about a Tesla running out in D.C. or maybe it was going to run out and that you can't buy an electric car because you'll run out if you're stopped. But you actually use less power in cold weather stopped than you do in a gas car.
Yeah, and presumably in hot weather, too.
That's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering how far you could go. Maybe you need to do a test this summer. Sleep in your car for a heat wave or two.
No,
I tell you, I was ready to do that at your cottage last summer where there was a heat wave that tried to kill James.
Yeah.
It was, there's no respite if you can't either jump in the lake or jump in your car.
No, and I saw a video on YouTube. A guy had actually tried to cool his house with his Tesla. Like he hooked up a hose from his Tesla to his house.
I don't know if that's the best approach.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. People will do.
People
I guess
desperate.
if you get that desperate, that's interesting. Wow. Rolling blackouts even here.
It is possible.
I thought that they reached their peak demand in the wintertime because they put out press releases a couple of times when it was during cold snaps last winter that they set an all-time record.
Well, isn't that typically for the natural gas peak demand?
Yes, it is. But also electricity, though.
Okay.
I don't know because everybody's stuck in their homes and cooking, and some people, a small number of people are using electricity for heating, which is not very economical here. I think I talked about it previously because they specified the actual kilowatts, and I was kind of curious as to what our province used. Well, not kilowatts, but megawatts at a peak time. So I'll have to go back and look at that. Maybe I'll have an update for you next week. That brings us to, we're getting close, Brian, to the end of the show, and that means it's time for the lightning round. Whoa, Nelly. John Armitt of the Financial Times wrote an op-ed calling on the UK to come clean on the costs of nuclear power and urges the government to be upfront about the cost that is going to come to your electric bill. He writes, "It's clear no developer is prepared to build a new major nuclear plant without government support." Using the RAB model will get these schemes going, but the decision to put the cost on energy bills, not taxation, will mean consumers pay up front. People say nuclear is free. You set it up, produces power forever, no cost. Not true. Not true, Brian.
Yeah, so I was reading some more on nuclear power here in Canada. We have a nuclear power station in Darlington in Ontario. Ontario has a few nuclear plants. And they are also expanding. I think they're adding another reactor or something. Are
they?
I don't know. I can't remember the details. But the point being is that they had an interview I saw from a spokesman for the power plant. And I felt like he kind of gave the game away where he said something like, well, if you were going to do this with solar, you'd need an area like 100 times the area that our nuclear plant is. But in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, that's all you need? Just 100 times more of the land? Oh.
That's it?
So I felt like he really kind of gave the game away there. If that's that's not what people are worried about is the size of the area of a solar panel.
Wow. I wouldn't want a solar farm near me. They might melt down. That's so crazy. And especially with multi-use solar like rooftop and agrivoltaics where you intermix agriculture, grazing or crop growing with the panels. It's not a big deal to use that land, especially as we move away from beef. We're going to have all kinds of grazing land available and it'll be it's going to work out. There's going to be hiccups, but it's going to work out. Global heating is cutting sleep across the world, a study finds. Hotter nights mean people find it harder to sleep. God knows this was true for you and I last summer, especially women and older people. That's me, with serious health impacts. I survived it, but it's something that, these things affect the world in many ways, and sleep is not something we've mentioned before. Electric shortcut to motorcycle license is the headline. This European country is giving electric-only motorcycle classes. Interesting. Because you know what? I bet they're different to drive than regular motorcycles, don't you think?
Yeah, probably easier, I would think.
Easier and more torquey. Plus the, regenerative braking, which I assume motorcycles have. I don't know that they do, but there's probably not a lot of gain from electrical regenerative braking, even though some e-bikes have them. Electrify America says its charging network will be entirely offset by solar energy next year, and that its electricity is already 100% renewable as of April. So tell that to your racist uncle who says that EVs burn coal. If you're on the highway using Electrify America, it's 100% clean. So America's first electric fire truck joins the Los Angeles Fire Department. Jalopnik says the Rosenbauer RTX has a diesel generator for backup, but in everyday driving, it will be silent and emissions-free, which made me laugh. Because the fire trucks aren't silent, they have sirens on them.
No,
you don't want a fire
loud.
truck to be silent.
It was the only, I went to the lake this weekend. It was the only noise. It was so quiet out there, but I don't know, the fire department was having a kids' day or something, and they just kept running the siren on the fire truck. It was very annoying.
Nice. That's such a pleasant lake experience having sirens run. The Swiss e-bike startup Opium is set to release 2 new long-range electric bicycles with a range of, get this, are you sitting down? 340 kilometers or 210 miles. Brian, my taint will not last that long on a bicycle.
So does this bike just weigh 1,000 pounds or something? Where the batteries?
No, the energy density is improving and the efficiency of the batteries, and you're probably pedaling assisting to get that much range. But the bikes also, speaking of which, they actually do feature regenerative braking, which adds a tiny bit more range, not much. And you also have the option of fitting a second battery for an even longer range. You could go all through Europe on this e-bike with a couple batteries and then charge up and come back home. It's just...
That's crazy.
It's nuts. It's nuts. So 5 oil and gas companies were added to the S&P 500 index, ESG index, when Tesla was removed. Marathon Oil Corporation, Phillips, Valero, Baker Hughes, EOG Resources, which is Enron. What do you think about that? What do you think about Tesla being removed?
Yeah, this is crazy. So the ESG index from the S&P 500 is a supposedly group of ethical companies that are working to improve their carbon footprint, but Tesla evidently was not able to prove to them that they're doing anything. I mean, they probably didn't try. It's sort of obvious that they're doing what they're doing is good for their carbon footprint. But yeah, literally oil companies are on this index, which just seems crazy.
When I think of ethical, I think of Enron. First thing I think of, right? I mean, come on. From Clean Technica, how profitable is each car Tesla selling? They suggest 4.5 times more than each of Ford or GM. We were talking last week about how can they make these cars make a profit off like the F-150 at 40 grand.
Yeah.
To fleets. It's they're not making a lot. Tesla is making a fortune right now, especially because they raise the prices.
30% profit on each car that they make right now, and it's something like 5% for the majors. But yeah, Ford, I mean, they've, if they can keep making these things and get the scale up, so maybe they're breaking even or even losing money now, but if they can get to scale, then hopefully they can make some profit.
It's time for a clean energy show fast fact. India registers more air pollution deaths per year than any other country. Not terribly surprising. From Bloomberg Green, the grid has had too much supply, and now some generators in the northeast had to pay consumers to take their power. Boston's unexpectedly pleasant day, I guess they were planning for a hot day or something like that, and turned out to be a quite pleasant, temperate day, sent power prices to negative $150 per kilowatt. Or per megawatt rather, and a blanket of clouds and a cool breeze waiting over the Boston this weekend curbed air conditioning needs so that much of the electricity prices cratered, and they wanted to pay people to take their electricity, I guess.
Well, this is the future that we're all expecting when we have abundant clean energy is free or negative price electricity. That's fantastic.
A study on bifacial solar panels show that they can reduce double-digit losses from snow cover to just 2% because 18% is gained from snow reflection. Bifacial picks up reflection of light off the ground. Snow is the best scenario for that. I notice here in Canada, where we have long winters, they are putting up bifacial panels, and that, I guess, is why, Brian.
Yeah, that's really helpful for the winter here because, of course, we do have kind of low-angled sun and kind of short days. So something like bifacial panels, getting a little extra from the snow off the ground, that's fantastic.
Tesla Model Y catches fire while driving. The driver struggled to escape because he didn't know where his manual door handle was because of power cut. Do you know where yours is? You ever used it? Do you tell the family?
Yeah, no, I have used it, but it is a concern because
it's not in the back seat, right?
It's not obvious. Yeah, I don't know how. I never sit in the back seat, so I'm not sure. But it's a sort of the car is fully electric and the doors are electric. There's a little solenoid that clicks. So if the car has no power, the door won't open, and so there's an emergency release, and it is not particularly obvious. Obviously, if you buy a car, you should learn the features and how that works because it's super important. It could save your life. Apparently, this guy smashed out the window
with his feet. I don't think I'd be able to do that. Yeah. I could smash it out, but I don't think I'd be able to haul my fat ass out of there before burning alive. In a related story this week, Brian, Ford has announced a recall of 350 gas SUVs for fire risk. Before you start thinking that EVs are the only thing that catch fire. And finally, from Bloomberg New Energy, electric vehicles of all types are currently displacing about 1.5 million barrels a day of oil demand, but most of it actually is from electric 2- and 3-wheelers in other parts of the world that we don't really see happening, and that is only getting started. So let's remember the oil crash from 2014 was 2 million barrels in excess. Well, this is a pretty significant number just from 1- 2-wheelers and also electric buses in Asia, which is just a fraction of transportation.
No, electric buses are quite huge in Asia, and this is something Tony Seba has talked about quite frequently, that it doesn't take a massive switch to everything to create this kind of an oil glut. It's just, we're almost there already.
That's our time for this week. We'd like to hear from you. Contact us at cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. On Twitter or TikTok, our handle is cleanenergypod. Don't forget to check out our YouTube channel for special features. Leave us a voicemail at speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow. Thanks everyone for listening. If you're new to the show, you come over from TikTok or something like that, remember to subscribe on your podcast app or however you're listening to us, and you'll get new episodes delivered every week. We look forward to talking to you next week.
See you next week.